Islamic Republic is worried about domestic repercussions. Much like Syria, Iran is an anti-Western regime. It is much like Syria again, under sanctions. And another similarity between them is that they are both anti-Israel regimes. So the Iranian regime will be looking very closely at what happened in Syria and will be doing a lessons learned. There are already people in Iran who are saying that the Assad regime fell because it did not listen to the people of Syria. They are hinting that the Islamic Republic's leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, must do the same. But what the important question is, does the supreme leader of Iran have the bandwidth and the capability to carry out the important changes needed?
Now, when we spoke to the Times' war correspondent Anthony Lloyd yesterday, he told us why Syria's Assad regime had fallen so quickly out of sight of the world. It had become a husk. It is militarily weak and its supporters were pulling away. Could the same be true of Iran? The Ayatollahs have been in power since 1979, but now they seem weaker than for many years. Meir Javedanfar, professor of Iranian politics at Reichman University in Tel Aviv, is on the line. We can speak to him now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
This is a big blow, obviously, for Iran for lots of different reasons, of course. What do you think the discussions will be going on in Tehran over the last couple of days will be?
They are very concerned about the repercussions of Assad's fall on the stability of the Islamic Republic's foreign policy in the region. Its projection of power has been greatly diminished. Its deterrence has been reduced because before it relied on the missiles of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the presence of Iranian forces in Syria to deter Israel from attacking Iran's nuclear installations. These have all disappeared. All disappeared, almost. Hezbollah has retained some missiles, but it has no political will right now to become involved in another war against the state of Israel. But more importantly, the Islamic Republic is worried about domestic repercussions. Much like Syria, Iran is an anti-Western regime. It is much like Syria again, under sanctions. And another similarity between them is that they are both anti-Israel regimes. So the Iranian regime will be looking very closely at what happened in Syria and will be doing a lessons learned. There are already people in Iran who are saying that the Assad regime fell because it did not listen to the people of Syria. They are hinting that the Islamic Republic's leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, must do the same. But what the important question is, does the supreme leader of Iran have the bandwidth and the capability to carry out the important changes needed?
Well, that's, I keep thinking about the Iranian people. And again, they're not one homogenous lump. Some of them may support the Ayatollahs and some of them we know do not. We've seen some of the protests that have erupted and then been suppressed very quickly. How is there anyone? I don't think there is. Is there? There aren't any groups within Iran or just outside Iran who could return to the country and do what Al-Jilani and HTS have done. Is there?
There is no unified opposition. There are almost 4 million Iranians, at least, who have left Iran because of the revolution, after the revolution. You have many super talented Iranians in the United Kingdom and other places. You would be hard pressed to find many top universities where you don't find Iranian lecturers and many Iranian successful entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs. These people, overwhelming majority of them, including Iranians in Israel, including myself, would love to be able to contribute to the rebuilding and redevelopment of Iran. But for that to happen, there is no opposition. There is no strong opposition. As much as we all respect the son of the late Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, his son Reza, he does not, his opposition is in no way ready to be accepted by the majority of the people of Iran, not as far as we know. And more important than that, the question remains, are the people of Iran ready for a violent revolution against the regime? That is not clear. Many people in Iran, I would dare say 80% of people in Iran, want the regime gone. The question is how. The question is, are they willing to risk themselves being massacred in the same extent that Assad massacred the people of Syria? He killed 500,000 of his own people. There are people in Iran who are concerned that the Iranian regime would do the same. There are also questions about what would happen the day after.
Well, I'm sure there are many questions, and the timeline, of course, is interesting too. Meir, thank you for talking to us. Hopefully, we'll speak to you again another time. Many questions to ask you, Meir Javedanfar. He's professor of Iranian politics at Reichman University in Tel Aviv. As we were just saying, it is a tense time for Christian and Alawite communities in Syria. How will the new Islamist regime treat them? Will the Christians be given religious freedom? Will revenge be taken on the Alawites, given the Assad family are from that group? Edwin Bauer has written about that for The Times this morning, and we can speak to him now. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Hi.
Just explain, if you can, I mean, let's take each group, shall we, one at a time. Christians in Syria, how many are there roughly? And historically, how have they been treated?
How many there are is a lot less than how many there were at the start of the war. They used to make up about 10% of the population. I think now we believe that there are fewer than 3%, so probably 300,000 Christians in total. So a sizable population, but not like how they used to be. And the reason that their numbers have declined so much over the war is obviously these clashes with Islamist movements, most notoriously ISIS. I was speaking to people yesterday who said they were forced to pick up guns and defend their town against opposing militias. And so faced with the prospect of militias that may make up soldiers who could theoretically have been in the past been part of those opposing forces, now we're in a stage where those people appear to be forming a government. It's a nervous time for them. I should say that there haven't been really any violent reprisals recorded against Christians so far, and that there's a sense of cautious optimism, but there's obviously a big cause for concern.
Yes, and also with Christmas approaching, one would hope that they would be able to celebrate as freely as they would like to. And what about the Alawites? I mean, we hear a lot about the Alawites because of the Assad family's connections. You know, that they were Alawite as well. Can you explain what the Alawites are, and what do you think the future for them is in the new Syria? Bearing in mind their connection with the Assad regime?
Yes, well, the Alawite sect is more difficult to explain. It's often associated with Islam, but certainly in the eyes of extremists like Jolani and others, they're apostates. Basically, they were always high on the list of targets of extremist groups. But they were also the group from which President Bashar al-Assad himself hailed, and they made up a huge proportion of the security forces and the security apparatus, the prison service and the soldiers under his regime. So it's quite likely that we'll see reprisals, if not against Alawites in general, certainly against people in the regime, and indeed we have already seen it. And so I think many Alawites feel that this is a very scary time. People have moved in big numbers from Damascus to the coast, where people apparently feel more safe. And I've also heard today that there have been rows of cars leaving Syria as a whole to Lebanon. I should say that HTS, the Islamist groups or Islamist affiliated groups that have taken over Syria, have been at pains to say that they're not seeking reprisals against any religious minorities, and indeed they've tried to signal to everybody Christmas will remain. Christmas decorations are not going to be pulled down. Alawites are not going to be chased. And we haven't seen any of that yet. What people are worried about is the future, the coming weeks and months. After things become more settled, is life going to change substantially for religious minorities living in Syria?
And the other thing, I suppose, is Syrians who've been displaced, who have sought refuge in other countries, neighbouring countries, and perhaps even beyond, who aren't part of so-called minorities. How believable is it when the Prime Minister says, come back and help us rebuild? I mean, is that kind of... obviously it's difficult for you to know, but what might be going through their minds? I mean, because they have to make up their mind on pretty threadbare evidence, really, as to whether, whether this is going to be a free country and a good experience for them.
I think you're right. I've been speaking to Syrians as well, also in the diaspora in other parts of the Middle East and in Europe, and very mixed responses. Some people can't wait to get back, and they're being slowed down by the problems with transportation. The airport remains shut. There is a border crossing with Lebanon, but that is proving very busy and very difficult. Others have told me it's too early to say. They want to return to Syria. Many have been away for perhaps 14 years if they left when the war started. But then they don't want to come back too early. In terms of, is it a genuine desire for the government to see people return? I think it must be. I think some of the most talented, most educated Syrians, there are at least 4 million Syrians living in exile right now. The prospect that those can come back, and we're talking about doctors and engineers and skilled people, if they were willing to come back and help build what the new administration is keen to call a new Syria, I think that would be a great benefit to them, and I do believe it's a genuine desire.
And finally, the other thing weighing on these people's minds, I presume, will be what happens in the kind of the immediate aftermath of Assad leaving, which is, it might be anyway, that the people who remain from the Assad regime being brought to book in whatever way that is. Show trials, executions, jailing. I mean, who knows? What's your feeling about what is going to happen there?
We've heard mixed statements, but I think increasingly those who've won the civil war are keen to put on trial those who presided over Assad's prisons, Assad's security services. That they've said multiple times in the last couple.
Okay, I think we've lost the connection there to Edmund, but I think we got a good idea of just all the various decisions that people are having to make, things that people are having to weigh up. It's a very febrile time. You just had the overthrow of a dictator who's fled. You have all these various groups in control of different parts of the country. You've got people being pursued because of their connections with the Assad government. And then you have these minorities, and it must be particularly, I don't know if difficult is the word, but particularly kind of mind-sharpening right now for the Christians, because, as you say, they've got Christmas coming up.
Yeah, and there's an interesting piece by him about he's been in a cafe talking to Christians, well worth reading if you have a copy of the Times or you subscribe online. The connection to Damascus isn't brilliant, but that was pretty good because we got sort of 6 minutes out of him. We've been struggling all week to maintain those internet connections, but worth it. He's on the ground in Damascus.
Just in case you just turned on the radio, that was Edmund Bauer, who's written for the Times this morning.